Hey everyone, welcome back to another video, and I'm going to jump straight into this one. The purpose of this video is basically going to show the difference that it makes taking your Knull from level 60 to level 70, including the gears from 20 to 25. There's actually a hidden penalty associated specifically with native tier 3s that happens when you don't take their gears from 20 to 25. And I found out about this after my alliance mate Cyrus, also known as Muted Silent in the game, discovered this after some extensive timeline testing. So if you want to see the results of that and how it's more than likely impacting your builds, make sure to stick to the end. Besides this, I'll be comparing my results for PvE between level 60 and 70, as well as showing how the rank 1 PvP Knull does in Alliance Conquest, as well as the different teams that you can pair them up with. There's also a bug that happens when you use Knull in Alliance Conquest, and I'll be looking at that too. Off the bat here, you can see that my physical damage at level 60 is 40,000, my HP is around 96,000, and my physical and energy defense is around 15 to 16,000. The other stats don't matter too much because they won't be affected by the gear upgrades. Although you will note that once I show the level 70 stats, like here, you'll see that some of those stats like crit rate, crit damage, dodge, and other ones have decreased instead of increasing. And that's because at a higher level, each point of value gives a slightly less increase in percentage. But anyways, you can see that at level 70 with max gears, my damage increases about 4,400, and my physical and energy defense increases around 2,000 to 3,000. Besides this, my HP also increases by a whopping 13,000, so from 96,000 to 109,000. And all these stat increments are directly associated with the gears being upgraded. Nothing else has changed, all my card stats are the same, and the testing should be consistent from 60 to 70, showcasing just what level 60 to 70 does, as well as gears 20 to 25 does to the build and the results. Also keep in mind that this is all with no damage proc and a regen CTP. In the first video I posted, Knull at level 60 scored about 3,800,000 points in ABX, and at 70 max gears he scores about 4.4 million in ABX. Keep in mind though that this second test score should be much higher because this was done during burn week, and the previous one was done during paralysis week, and since Knull doesn't have burn, then I had to kind of swap characters, and the score was a bit lower than it should have been. In squad battle he scored about 1 million points at level 60. And then maxed out, he scores about 1.7, 1.8 million. Although the increased damage does help with the higher score in itself is because you don't have that penalty anymore for being under level 70 and having most of your hits missing. Versus stage 50 Thanos, I was able to complete it with about 44 seconds left at 60. And then at max build, I was able to complete the same Thanos stage with 1 minute and 24 seconds remaining, so that's 40 seconds faster. During my solo master mode testing at level 60, I was able to complete it in 2 minutes and 54 seconds, or 7 minutes and 6 seconds remaining. The same testing at max level, I was able to complete master mold in 1 minute and 27 seconds, or 8 minutes and 33 seconds remaining. So I was able to clear it 1 minute and 27 seconds faster than at 60. There is some slight variation because I didn't do 100% of the damage, but those are rough numbers. Galactus, I was initially able to complete in about 7 minutes, or 3 minutes remaining. At max level, I was able to do the same thing, but this time surprisingly in 2 minutes and 22 seconds, or 7 minutes and 38 seconds remaining. That means that at max level, I was able to complete the same content at a whopping 4 minutes and 38 seconds faster. So you can already see so far that the penalty for not being level 70 is pretty significant in Giant Boss Raid and also squad battle. In a little bit, you'll also see that gears might be playing a bigger factor than normal for native tier 3 performance. I obviously wasn't able to test Knull at level 60 because of the restrictions, so I have nothing to compare it against. I tried various stage levels to see how high I could push, but 6 was about the highest I could get without a damage proc. Anything past that stage was a little bit too much to burst down during his phase where he has about 6 to 7 health bars left. But as you'll see from this video, I was able to complete this stage using his own leadership and 2 supports, which I think is pretty impressive considering that I wasn't able to complete this stage with some characters even with a damage proc. But I guess that demonstrates how good Knull's base damage is, as well as how useful pierce damage is on his kit. It allows you to push much higher in most PvE modes, even without energy, rage, or even an obelisk. Anyways, as you can see here, I was able to complete this stage in 4 minutes and 54 seconds, or 6 seconds remaining. In previous videos, I showed that Knull can take on pretty much any character in Timeline, so I didn't bother following that up here because he can just do it better. Instead, I decided to showcase what Knull can do in Alliance Conquest at max build, and that is take on multiple meta characters at once just by himself. Because of his self debuff, you can do some pretty crazy character combinations that you normally couldn't with other metas. So in most cases that would be using a double support for him. In this particular video I'm using Colossus and Phyla-Vell to get the damage increase and also some mitigation for survival. And as you can see, it's working out pretty well, especially when he uses his 4th skill. I was testing out a lot of solo double support builds for Knull, and the one that I landed on that worked the best for me was Phyla-Vell and Victorious. And the reason for that is because Phyla-Vell provides a pretty huge damage buff for him, including the bonus damage done, as well as the 30 additional damage to universal types. But besides this, she also provides the energy reflect counter, which is pretty big because most of the top metas are energy based characters. I'm not entirely sure if Victorious benefits from the 30% increased damage provided by Phyla-Vell, but she does provide that HP increase to both Phyla-Vell for more reflect and obviously Knull. Besides this, Victorious also has native penetration in her kit, which helps out Knull since he only has it on his 3rd ability. The other 2 good benefits about this team are that if both Victorious and Phyla-Vell die, then there's less targets to hit Knull and kind of keep him locked down so he can do more work essentially. In addition, if you happen to watch my Molecule Man Leadership Explained video, you'll see that neither Phyla-Vell's passive or Victorious's passive is nullified in any way, so Molecule Man can't be used as a counter for this team. The obvious downsides for using this team combination is that you can get unlucky with Knull's rotation, or he could get potentially locked down and you could end up doing nothing with him. Alternatively, it's also easier for him to get countered solo because you can use reflect characters to specifically target him. With Alliance Conquest providing better rewards now when you reach that 30 wins to get the mythic box, I decided to kind of include this information in case you want to kind of stretch out your roster and potentially get more wins. There's an interesting bug related with Knull, so you'll see he's dead in the preview here for the fight, but as soon as I load into the stage, you'll see that he's just kind of eerily standing there. Apologies in advance, by the way, the video kind of breaks down a little bit here because I'm recording on my phone, but if you notice on his health bar, you'll see that he starts off with 1 HP. From what I gathered, this happens when the fight ends, so this doesn't necessarily mean the first half or the second half. It can be kind of either or. If the fight ends with him proccing his passive where he can't die and he stays at 1 HP, it'll show him as dead on the map. So if you see his character portrait grayed out or he's dead on the map, it's more than likely not the case. Also, on another note, kind of tying back to the teams that you can use Knull on, you'll see that a lot of people like to use him on big teams with powerful metas, so like Sentry, you can use him with Jean and even Silver Surfer. Anyways, as soon as I load out of the fight here, you'll see that Knull, even though he gained most of his health back in the second fight, he still shows up as dead on the map. The last thing that I wanted to talk about, which is probably the most interesting and most important, is that there seems to be a hidden kind of penalty associated specifically with native tier 3s, where if you don't take their gears to the max level of 25, their damage output seems to be more restricted than other characters who wouldn't have taken those gears to level 25, so specifically non-native tier 3s. Basically what I mean is if you had a character like Knull and you had him at level 20 gears or 22 gears, and you had another character like Thanos and you kept him at level 20 or 22 gears, there seems to be a penalty applied to Knull that isn't applied to other characters like Thanos. What I suspect is that Netmarble probably put this mechanic or system in place on purpose to not consider a character truly as a T3 until all of their gears are maxed out. So until that happens, there seems to be kind of a hidden modifier that restricts your damage output in some way. Normally, I would have urged people to kind of stay at around level 22 gears, since that's where you get your first upgrade, but considering the results that Muted Silent or Cyrus presented to me with his testing, it kind of convinced me otherwise, that you basically always want to take native tier 3 gears to max level 25. So what he did for his testing was he found two players that had almost identical stats. This means near equivalent crit damage, ignore defense, and so on the characters themselves, and no pierce damage whatsoever on either player's cards. And then he took multiple hits from the enemy sentry to gauge the damage highs and lows for each of those hits, and to kind of avoid procs interfering with the results. For these timeline tests, the first player averaged about 4,700 damage on the initial hit for the low end, and then on the high end it was around 5,200 damage. And you can see that here in this next screenshot. Now the important thing to note here besides damage is that this player's gears on their sentry were level 24 on the first gear, and then 22, 22, and 22 on the other gears. Besides that, the other factor that influences the damage that was dealt was that this sentry had 40,000 energy attack roughly. Versus the second player with near identical stats, the minimum average damage that was dealt on the first hit was around 5,500 or 5,500. And then in the next screenshot here, you can see that the average maximum damage that was dealt on the initial hit was 6,200. The difference here is that this player's sentry gears are all at level 25, and their energy attack is also at 39,000, so 1,000 less than the previous player. However, even by having 1,000 less energy damage, this player was able to deal 800 more damage on the low end and 1,000 more damage on the high end. Considering that there was no other significant factors affecting these results, it's reasonable to assume that by not maxing out the gears on your native tier 3, then you do receive some kind of damage output penalty on your character. I'm not entirely sure whether this penalty applies to all modes. It definitely applies to PvP modes, but considering the drastic results that I was getting in the PvE tests, I wouldn't be surprised if it applies there too. Anyways, that pretty much wraps up this video. If you found any of the content interesting, then please consider maybe subscribing or liking the video, and leaving a comment always helps out the channel too. I have more content like this that I'm working on, so if you don't want to miss it, then subscribing would probably be the best option. And if you do, make sure to hit the bell icon, which will kind of alert you when I have a new video out. Anyways, thanks for your time, but the video is now over.